Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So this video is a quick update regarding the opening of international borders for international students in Australia. Now on 13th of November, Australian Prime Minister met with other state and territory leaders to discuss about the international students' arrival and some other issues. So one of the key things that came out of this meeting was that international students have to still wait for a while before they can get here in Australia. Now let's look at the reasons behind this. So the first thing first is that at the moment there are around 36,000 Australians who are stranded overseas and they are willing to come back to Australia. And Australian government is planning to bring most of them by the end of this year before Christmas. The important thing here to understand is that although Australian government would love to bring them as soon as possible, there is a restriction of how many people can actually fly into Australia at the moment. So the total number of people who can come to Australia is 6,000 people per week. So that limits the number of people who can actually fly into Australia in one specific week. Now, as easy as it might seem, the quarantine is actually quite a big exercise. So the government have to consider the amount of people who can fly in because they have to make arrangements regarding hotels, logistical issues like transportation and so on, security issues with police and other personnel. So there are a lot of things involved in making sure that Australians are arriving safely and the virus is not spreading among the local community here. Because at the moment, Australia is doing pretty well compared to many other countries around the world. And Australian government is making sure that they want to keep these numbers as low as possible or zero if possible. And you might have heard that Victoria have gone more than 2 weeks without having any cases or any number of deaths. So that's a very positive news here. And Australian government wants to ensure that these numbers stays the same. Although as told by Prime Minister that there will be a delay in bringing international students, the pilot programs to bring international students both in South Australia and in Northern Territory will go ahead as planned. So these planned pilot projects will go ahead before the end of this year. Now, Australian government do recognize the importance of international students in Australia and the significant impact they make to Australian economy. But Australian Prime Minister did not give any specific timeline on when they are expecting international students to come back. So it is certainly a bit disappointing. And again, the reason being that many Australians are still overseas and they would like to come back home as soon as possible. But because of number of flights available, because of the quarantine arrangements and restrictions on these things, that is making a little bit difficult for international students' arrival. Now, we do understand that Australian government certainly has a duty toward their citizens to bring them home, and that is their first priority. So there is no questions about that. But certainly universities and international students are getting a bit frustrated regarding the timeline that has not been announced when international students can actually make back to Australia. The Prime Minister also added that they will discuss this further down the track on when they can bring international students safely back in Australia. But as I said earlier, he didn't give any specific timeline or didn't commit to any specific time frames. Now, one of the very interesting things that came out of that press conference by the Prime Minister is that many international students want to come back to Australia before the Christmas. I'm not sure if actually that's the case, and I would love to hear regarding this from you. When would you like to come back to Australia? Would you like to come back before Christmas or before the start of next term, which is for most of the universities is in February or March. But as per our discussions with few students, we figure out that most of the students actually want to come before the start of the next term, which is in February, March 2021. So we would love to hear your thoughts on that. Now, we do understand that it's not easy to bring thousands of people from overseas, especially during this pandemic. But there has to be some sort of strategy that Australian government needs to put in place to let international students and universities and institutes know when they are planning to bring them back here in Australia. So at least if there's a time frame available, that will be great to know about. So we came up with a quick proposed plan for Australian government. Here it is how it might work. Step 1. Bring all the stranded Australians overseas back in Australia before the Christmas. And once all the Australians are back home before the end of this year, that will free up some space to bring international students and use those quarantine measures for them. At the moment, there is a capacity of 6,000 people who can return back home. So if you do the calculation, you can easily bring around 30,000 or more people by the end of this year. And even if you take a couple of extra weeks into the next year, it will still leave with plenty of time to bring a lot of international students before the start of the next term. Step number 2, working with airlines. Now, in order to bring international students back safely in Australia, it will be a good idea to make an agreement with the local airlines like Qantas and do repatriation style flights. Now obviously students will have to pay for these flights, but it shouldn't be at ridiculous prices that we have seen lately that some Australians have to pay in order to come back to Australia. And that is why having an agreement with airline is important, so that they should be charging a reasonable prices to the students. Now step number 3 is quarantining. Now here international students should be quarantined as other Australians do for a couple of weeks, and that is perfectly fine because we want to ensure that Australian community is safe. But the quarantining should not be done in 5-star hotels. It should be done possibly in university accommodations or in a purpose-built style student accommodations. There are plenty of these sort of accommodations available in all the major cities in Australia. So you have providers like Scape Accommodation, the Student Housing Company, the Urban Nest, and many other providers. And you can make a partnership with them so that these students can quarantine in these student accommodations. And again, prices can be negotiated in order to make sure that the students are not getting ripped off with ridiculous amount of prices for this quarantining. At the moment, Australians are paying around $2,500 per person for their 2 weeks of quarantine in a hotel. But in order to keep this cost as reasonable as possible, Australian government can certainly make partnership with these purpose-built student accommodations. And as a part of quarantine, students should be tested for the COVID-19 as well. And in regards to this quarantining cost, there could be a split between universities or students as well that can be negotiated between those parties. Now the ultimate goal that can help this achieve is to be working with airlines, universities, accommodation partners, and other industry partners who are working in international education in Australia. Now we do understand that this is a very quick proposed plan, and there are a lot of ins and outs that need to be worked around for this plan or some other plan, but there has to be some sort of strategy for bringing international students back in Australia. So if you like this proposed plan, we got some work for you. So if you can share this video on Twitter and tag Australian Prime Minister and Immigration Minister, that will help us to raise the awareness that international students need some sort of timeline and strategy from Australian government. And we hope that this can be worked out as soon as possible, because a lot of universities, institutes, and international students are waiting to hear from Australian government and their strategies. And as always, if you find this video useful, please make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel to get more updates like this one. Well, thank you for watching. See you in the next one.